Hello, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 4 of the AMM Conversation, official podcast of the Association of Medical Media. I'm your host, Jason Carris. Before we begin, please make sure to follow, rate, subscribe, and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues. We appreciate the help. Today, we welcome James Brady to the podcast. Jim is a Vietnam veteran with more than 50 years in the pharmaceutical and medical media industries. He began his career as a detailer for Bayer and has spent the past 4 decades in pharmaceutical advertising. He's founder and president of James Brady Inc., a publishing rep firm he established in 1984. He currently is publisher for Allergy and Asthma Proceedings, as well as clinical highlights for the Rheumatologist. An avid golfer and family man, he's the former chairman of the Pharmaceutical Advertising Council Speakers Bureau and a longtime member of the Association of Medical Media. Let's start with a quick overview of, what's really evolved in this industry in the last 1, 3, 5 years.
Well, what has evolved even past 1 and 3, 5 years is the personal contact. This is at the physician level in the physician's office. Many years ago, when I started in this industry as a detailer, we had access to the physician. We either waited our turn or got taken in right away, or waited till there were no more patients. And the physician brought us in. We gave them the detail. We talked about family and children and anniversaries. As I was leaving the territory, the physicians were seeing people by appointment, which was almost unheard of. It has even gone further down the road for a detailer to see a physician. They can visit the office and they can drop off their samples and get a signature, but to see the physician personally, sometimes it requires where the detailer has to order lunch for the staff on an appointed day and appointed time, and maybe the physician will come in and have lunch or grab a bite to eat, and you can ask him or her some questions and give a brief detail. So the personal aspect has been watered down, and because of that, some of the drug companies have cut back on their sales force and have gone to other means to try to reach that physician.
The rules were different, no sunshine law, samples were king back then. The lack of that personal touch, what has that meant to medical marketers? What has that meant for medical media?
Well, for medical media, they're trying to drill down to see, making contact with the physician has gotten more and more difficult over the years. The print media, which is still, I think, the most efficient way to go, years ago, to get the personal contact, what they would do, because they had no proof a journal ad would be seen, they would do a check study. So on an nth name basis, they would write the physician's name and actually insert a check inside the journal. And if the check was found and endorsed and sent back to them, they knew that that physician read the issue or saw the ad that the check was next to. That has kind of disappeared now. And I think that the younger product managers who are brought up in a digital world feel that impressions are more efficient than some of the print media. And I think that's what's happening, is that they're trying to get physician contact through digital media, through teleconferences, to product theaters. And I think that's how it's evolving.
Face-to-face can be very effective, Jim, but it's really hard to achieve today. What are your thoughts on, especially as we move towards 2021, being able to connect face-to-face, or even just be able to, have a conversation with a physician?
Well, I'm sure what's being done right now is that if you are a detailer and you have some kind of personal relationship with a physician, they still don't want you there because even though you're wearing a mask and everything else, I would think that a small percentage of detailers are keeping up their relationship, just like some of the publishers' reps with the media people. They're actually communicating with the physician via Zoom calls, just keeping keeping touch, probably taking a low approach unless it's a new product introduction. But sampling, in the old days, whoever sampled the most, got the business. And today, with the personal contact cutting back, it is very difficult. But with the vaccines coming, we will be turning a corner shortly. And I think that all these restrictions will be lessened and things will eventually, get back to normal, and marketers can go back to the way they had been communicating with physicians.
In this era of Zoom calls and, digitalization, I know it's great, and working from home and all of those kind of things, I know it's great, but there's also some downsides. I get half a dozen meetings canceled or moved at the very last minute every week or two. Any tricks or ideas or thoughts on being able to really be effective in digital communication with these folks?
It is more difficult for somebody who is in the medical publishing business to keep contact with their clients. Personally, the main tool that I use is email. And but there's only so many times you can email a client and tell them what a great property you have, and you become an annoyance or a nuisance. What I have done with some of my clients, I have a friend who has, I don't know where he gets them, but he has these very, very funny videos. They're either embarrassing moments or they're things that children do that are very funny, anything from an infant to a something silly. And I try to use these videos as a way via email, just to send to some of my clients and say, hey, thought you'd be interested in this. And it's a way to keep in contact without being overbearing to either a current advertiser or somebody that you're recruiting. That's the trick that I use. Sometimes it works and I get all kinds of responses. That was great. Thank you so much for sending. Or sometimes it's silent and you don't know whether they liked it or hated it. So
I've heard in a number of conversations, both for the podcast and other projects, that a lot of what is old is new again. Have you seen or heard similar stories?
Well, what I've seen with certain clients is something that actually is an improvement, something that 20 years ago or 30 years ago did not exist. To have a marketer do a cover tip on the front page of a print media vehicle where the advertiser comes up with a pre-printed insert that meets the specifications of the publisher, and it could be just one sheet that's glued or tipped on, or something that they call a Peter Pocket cover tip, where you could have literally 15, 20 pages folded up, and it's inserted in this Peter Pocket, and then the Peter Pocket is glue stripped to the front cover, is something that I never thought we would see in the industry. There's always been inserts. In fact, many, many years ago, when inserts started to take favor, the New England Journal of Medicine, which is weekly, had a wait list. So if you wanted to run a pre-printed insert in their publication, since it's weekly, in January you had to wait till April, 4 months, because they only took a limited number of inserts, and you had to wait 4 months online to get your insert into that publication. The fact that COVID has shut down all these meetings, they're still being held virtually. And what the pharmaceutical companies are doing, they're trying to sponsor product theaters virtually and discreetly have messages sponsored by a particular company in this virtual rheumatology or allergy meeting or dermatology, whatever the meeting is. I mean, they are struggling to get their name in front of the doctor and it has really become very difficult. And I think when this is over, I think, like I say, it'll be back business as usual.
So you think that the challenge and the disruption, face-to-face meetings will return? You think doctors will return, to congresses and meetings? I do know that I've talked to a number of, even on the association side, they basically punted most meetings for 2021. I know a few are looking to go, like ASCO in June, I think. I know a lot of associations have just punted 2021, but you think that the face-to-face will return
Yeah,
in some
I
form?
really do. I really feel the face-to-face will return. I would say July 1st would be a date that any meeting scheduled after that. Um, I think air travel will return, but it certainly has set us back because of what has been going on in the world, and it's not just our industry, Jason. It's every industry, whether it's the plumbing industry, whether it's theaters, they're especially feeling the pain. I think those people who just keep hammering away, like you said, direct mail is making a comeback. In fact, we have had a request from agencies for companies. What percentage of our circulation, MD circulation, received the publication at home versus the office? And since many of the physicians weren't going into the office, the higher number of MDs that you had who received it at home, it was considered a plus.
No office staff filtering out the mail or the journals or setting them in a box for them to look at the end of the
Exactly.
week, right?
Exactly.
I've even heard, I think Jim Delash from Glaxo on our call on our roundtable in October said going to the mailbox is like an event for him.
Exactly.
You never know you never
That's
know what you're
true.
going to get,
That's
right?
true.
Let's talk about 2021. And 2020 was terrible. We're putting it in the rearview mirror. But fortunately, the pharma industry, medical media, like we said, has not been disrupted as much as some industries. If you were a sales rep, product manager in the airline space or the hotel space, you may not have a job right now, right? What positives potentially have come out of 2020, and what are you looking forward to for 2021?
One of the things that has been happening to our industry, which has not helped, is the tremendous amount of money that the industry has been spending, and I think has increased in 2020, is TV advertising. Companies, like AbbVie and Pfizer, AstraZeneca, they have increased TV advertising, and the money that some of the pharmaceutical venues would normally get. I mean, it's nothing new, but in 2020, it was increased. And I feel going forward in 2021 that when people will no longer be cooped up in their homes and they'll be eventually going back to their offices, that some of that money will be reallocated to professional ethical marketing. And I think that's going to be a good thing for our industry, that we will be getting back, not right away. It's not going to be a huge windfall of ads in medical journals and online and direct mail, but it will slowly subside to be in our favor. That's what I look forward to.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a report the other day that like 21 or 22% of every email sent from like April through July had a COVID-19 subject line. Not just in the medical media industry. Every email sent
Yes.
had a COVID, 1 in 5 in your inbox had something to do with the pandemic. Pharma industry, they want instant gratification, and they want to be able to drill down more than in years past. Can you just talk a little bit about that trend and the pros and cons of it for medical marketers?
Well, I mean, you can understand if you were a product manager and you were allocating money to the sales force and the sales force is not making the calls that they had been doing in the past, you want to spend your money in a way where you can see the result of that ad spend. ROI is more important today, and product managers, the young product managers, are feeling a need to. I just spent $500,000 on this promotion. How do I know it worked? I think that some companies are looking to see the impact, whether it's journal advertising or digital impressions, to trace that money spent to A, did the physician see the ad, and B, did they take action and prescribe my product? And I think that is the thing that they are looking for, and which the industry is trying to give them, although it is very, very difficult. And I think that's what's happening today. They want to know, did this investment work? And it's the publishers that are scrambling to give them the result for the money they spent.
It's almost a new battleground, really, isn't it? It's not delivering, the marketing. It's being able to clearly establish that it worked, especially in digital channels. That's literally a battleground. There's no common ground. I think everybody's kind of chasing that
Everybody
tail, right?
is chasing that tail. And if there is a way to do it that's simple, whoever designs that plan or that product or that service will really do well.
I know you love RFPs. What's different about
Well,
RFPs?
what's different about RFPs, they didn't exist 5 years ago. And RFPs basically are a way in which, for example, you're building a new house and you bring in an architect, they design the plans, and then you go to your contractor and say, this is what we want. But you may go to 3 or 4 contractors. Can they do this, and how much were they going to charge? That's what these RFPs are for. They try to standardize among publishers. If we give you this money and this is our ad unit, or these are the impressions that we're willing to buy from you, how are you going to do it? Give me evidence that your vehicle, digital or print, is going to be worth the money I spend with you. And in a way, I can understand why they do this. There are certain agencies that give you at least a week to prepare an RFP, and there's other agencies that give you 48 hours. And sometimes that's difficult to do in a timeline, especially if you need to research some of the questions that they have, and get back to them. But it's something that we will be having to fill out as publishers going forward for the next few years. I mean, this is going to be a standard procedure, and I can understand why they are needed.
Let's talk about 2021 again. One of the key words or key terminologies that I've heard this entire year has been the word acceleration. Acceleration for industries to digitize or to move to a more work from home or other types of technologies or workflows. The pandemic has pushed people to their limits. But I know that you still believe in print. So let's talk about 2021. What's your overarching view here on where the industry's headed?
Well, first of all, the the industry already has shaken out itself a little bit. What I mean by that, if there is a specific specialty, let's just pick surgery. I don't have a surgery publication, but one time there were maybe 30 surgery specialty books, which is way too many, way too many. And by attrition, they may be down to 15, 16. Just by attrition alone, after 2020, I'm sure there are going to be publications that are on the bubble just about making it or breaking even. They will no longer exist. And we will have more print media, less print media to choose from, which I think is a good thing for publishers and for pharmaceutical companies alike. I think that print will always be with us. I think that online will always be with us, digital advertising. I think you need a combination of both to be effective. And I think most agencies are sophisticated enough to work out a plan, with both.
Along those same lines, I was talking to RJ Lewis and Amy Turnquist, and they've seen a real shift to trusted media sources. That, like you just said, you don't need 30 publications in a space, maybe some spaces, but, physicians typically are going to, trend or rely on 3, 4, 5 in their certain specialty.
I would agree with that, Jason. And what happens is that unless you have a new product launch that's a blockbuster drug, most companies go 3 or 4 deep, and then the rest, either with a special position like a cover position, they get a smaller portion of that media budget. And Kantar Media, does a good job in selecting the best read publications. And I think that's what media agencies have been using. But it's not just the top 3. If they're all tabloids, maybe you need an official journal in there that gives you some credibility. I think that the days of, calling up a client because there's an article about their product in an upcoming issue is not as weighty as it used to be. McGraw-Hill years ago, they had a saying, McGraw-Hill Medical Publishers, media concentration rather than scatteration. So that bodes out what you said. In other words, there's a select group of publications that are the hardcore, true, proven, year in, year out. You go with those in your first line, and in your second line of spend, it depends on positioning and cost. And I think that's what media people are using today, and that's the right thing to do.
We'll be right back after a word from the Association of Medical Media.
Hi, I'm Todd Von Dijk, Executive Director of the Association of Medical Media, and we're thrilled that you've taken some time today to listen to this episode of our podcast series. For more information about our organization, please go online and visit www.ammonline.org. There you'll find a host of different resources and materials and tools that you can use. It's all part of our commitment to the medical media industry, and if you're inclined, we'd love to have you as a member. You can always reach out for ideas for new podcast series or to let us know you'd like to become more involved by an email to help@ammonline.org. Thanks again, and we'll get you back to this interview.
We're back with Jim Brady. Let's continue the conversation. Jim, as an industry veteran, I'm sure throughout your career you've seen new media tactics introduced, some successful, some not so successful and not here anymore. Any thoughts on, recent additions such as, multimedia, programmatic, even social media to the HCP marketing mix?
I know that the big publishers have used those tactics, social media, and to curry favor with physicians and healthcare specialists. And it's something that is going to be with us forever. And I think when I started 50 years ago, there were only 3 ways you could spend your money: journal advertising, the detail force, which got the lion's share of the money, and direct mail. That was it. Today, you have so many choices, so many things that you can use that's at your disposal. And the secret is to come up with a combination of those choices. Of basically, your menu is extensive. A lot of this really is client dependent. The philosophy or the business model, and sometimes agencies are forced to work with the client who has said, if this is my way or the highway. But lots of times companies will rely on the expertise of the ad agencies who have worked with all these things and have been successful. But I think that social media is certainly one way to influence physicians.
Jim, what's going to be different for your 2021 media plans?
Well, that's a good question, Jason. I think from what I can gather, I do not see advertisers leaving the print space. I think that they have been supportive and will be supportive. I think that FDA, I think, be more lenient in some new product introductions, which will open up some new revenue streams, for the industry. I think that the vaccine, they did their due diligence, and I think we are good to go, and we have more coming, and I think that's a good thing. But for 2021, as things get back to normal, I think you will see budgets. The problem is the budget's already set. So 2021, it's basically everybody knows how much they're going to spend. Now, if they need more money, they have to go back to the head of the department and say, look, doctors are back. They're in their offices. We need to go back to what we were doing before COVID, and let's get on board and spend the money where we have to.
Excellent. So, Jim, when you were a detailer, any horror stories from that career choice?
Well, I wouldn't call it a horror story, but when I was detailing in the early 70s, it was basically before HIPAA. I would go in and I would detail a physician, and the physician would tell me, oh, yes, I write Court Dome cream all the time. And I said, oh, good, thank you so much. Then I would go to the local pharmacy and I'd say, hey, pharmacy, Mr. Pharmacist, I just came from a sales call, and Dr. X says he writes Court Dome cream all the time. He says, Court Dome cream? I haven't seen a prescription from him in over a year. I said, really? I said, he goes, oh, yeah, he just bought some sharing stock and he's writing Valizone. I said, oh, do you mind if I, check out some of the other physicians in my territory? Can I look at at your prescription file? He says, well, okay, what you got anything special for me? I said, okay, here's some samples or some stock packages of whatever product I had. So I was able to go through the prescription files with the patient's name, the doctor, the actual prescription, and see what the physician was writing. And sometimes they wrote my product and sometimes they didn't. Now, today, that would never be allowed. And since we've reached the statute of limitations, I don't expect anybody to come to my door and arrest me, because I wouldn't have done it if it was illegal at the time. But that's something that I'm sure the detailers go into the pharmacist and may ask them, is so-and-so writing my product? But and it's up to the pharmacist to let them know. But it's something that I did, which would be, a clear federal violation.
Heading towards 2021, what have the biggest questions and challenges been from your clients?
Well, I think the biggest challenges they have is, am I spending my money correctly? And twice a year, Kantar Media comes out with a journal survey. and it's broken out into what physicians are read. How do they read it? Do they just skim it? Do they go, cover to cover? That's looked upon pretty closely. And if a journal one year is at the top of the list and all of a sudden there's a new editor or maybe a new shift in what happens, the editorial slant, I mean, you could go from number 1 to number 7. That certainly is something that the media people look at. My spending my money in the right places.
Are you on board with the shift towards real-time data and analytics? We were talking again, another podcast episode, and one of the biggest challenges, for agencies is, providing that real-time information. It used to be monthly, then it bi-monthly, weekly, now a real-time update, a dashboard. Are you on board with that? What are your feelings on that shift and also that pressure to perform?
Well, my feelings are that that's a good thing, that the real-time media, I mean, 10 years from now, we're going to look back and say all the things we did in 2020 were archaic compared to what real-time data we can get right now. And so if you're sitting as a product manager, you need to be up to speed on the latest market research, database, individual prescription activity. Whatever you can get, that's what you're going to sign up for. And those that accept that fact will do fine. And those that are stuck in the mud and say, I'm not changing my ways, they're going to be left behind.
Let's look 3, 5, 10 years down the road. You may or may not still be in this industry. Do you think it's headed in the right?
That is if I knew the answer to that, I would have my own island somewhere in the Caribbean. And I honestly feel that the changes will be so radical, it's going to be hard to imagine those changes. I think your previous question is in line with the last question, and that is, how is it going to be different? It's like when the first cell phone came out and it weighed 7 pounds, and you put it in your car, and you needed 2 hands to pick it up, compared to what we have now. I think that it's going to be something that will be better in the long run, and there'll be more accountability, more than even we have now. That's something that people will embrace because it will be available to them.
Yeah, and for AMM members, colleagues and those new to the industry or breaking into the industry, should they be excited about the future of medical media, concerned, cautiously optimistic? What's kind of your view on that?
I think if I was a young person entering the industry, I would be very, very upbeat. I mean, what our industry does is to educate and help physicians, nurses, healthcare providers with information that provides and is going to provide better healthcare for everyone. We are the conduit. We are the conduit to help these physicians in their everyday practice, whether it's office-based, hospital-based, or in the lab. We're so diverse. I am so happy to be in this industry, and I would be excited if I was just starting today and saying, I am proud to be in this industry. And I think that our industry in the last 2 years has been elevated to where at one time we were like the price gougers ripping off people to, hey, this industry is helping us survive and live and do better and have a better future. And I know the AMM is part of that platform with publishers to help them do their job. And I'm proud to be a member of the AMM.
That's all for this episode of AMM Conversation. Thank you for listening. AMM Conversation is the official podcast of the Association of Medical Media. Make sure to listen to each and every episode of AMM Conversation on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy podcasts. Kindly leave us a comment, subscribe, follow, or even share this podcast with colleagues. Also, make sure to check out the AMM website, www.ammonline.org, for the latest information and resources on medical media. In addition to fact sheets, industry research, and special reports, you can watch my monthly healthcare policy update featuring DC Insider John Bigelow, or the new YouTube series, John Loughran Viewed Your Profile, all on AMM's new YouTube channel. Check back next week for the final episode of Season 3, featuring a panel of industry veterans from Frontline Medical Communications. Have a wonderful day. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to the guests and not necessarily to the host or AMM or any other group or individual.